Okay, context is everything. And I want to read a Bible verse that I have up on the screen here so that you guys understand the context that I am viewing these events through. And as a result, that's where the analysis is coming from. Specifically, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. This is to say that when you see the scripting, quote unquote, that's going on with everything that is transpiring, the big events that are reported by the news, it's easy to sit there and say, how could this possibly be going on? How could human beings be doing this? And when you come at it from that perspective, when that is your context, it's very easy to dismiss things as coincidence or random chance. Well, no human beings could be doing that, so it can't be planned in advance. And it's like, well, hold on a second now. If your context is considering something else, potentially doing the scripting, something that is beyond mere human intellect, well, now it becomes a very real possibility. And I think it's important to bring that up before I go into all the stuff I'm going to cover here, because it's very easy to dismiss it as some kind of coincidence or something that you're just randomly putting together in a way that you're reaching. It's kind of like the Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme where Charlie is being the typical conspiracy theorist, drawing lines everywhere with a bunch of different pictures on a board and, making it a joke. But of course, these things are done in popular culture on purpose as well. That character is always portrayed in that way. It's never someone speaking in a very measured, calm way about something that is self-evident. And this is not to say that I'm viewing this in some righteous way as if I know better than it, whatever is doing this, or I somehow am pitting myself against it or anything like that. Something on this scale that would be capable of doing things like this is so far beyond my human intellect as one mind that it wouldn't even be a challenge for it to manipulate me or confuse me or checkmate me in any kind of game, right? So it's completely pointless to view it in that way, to put yourself in that position. All I can say is that something has given some of us the eyes to see what is unfolding. And there has to be a reason for that, right? What it is, I don't know. But for whatever reason, some of us have the ability to see this stuff. Even as individual dumb humans, right? Even as a limited human being that is so dumb in so many ways and is capped in what I am capable of understanding because of my limited perception. Somehow, I'm able to see some of this stuff, and other people are too. And what the reason for that is, I don't know. You guys can speculate on that if you want, but I'm not going to do that here. There are many different potential explanations there. But going all the way back to the Bible, this thing has been talked about in a way that is more than what we see in the physical world. And that is most likely what we are dealing with here. Anyways, enough of that. I wanted to get into this story about the stabbing that took place in North Carolina right as all of the stuff with Donald Trump, the blood moon eclipse, and the Charlie Kirk assassination was taking place. Sister claims North Carolina murder suspect was hearing voices and believed victim aboard train was reading his mind. This is in People magazine. Have you guys ever seen a People magazine before or read through it? My mom used to get People magazine when I was a kid. It is the most vapid, mind-numbing magazine in existence. The things that are in there. And the fact that this headline is in People magazine just shows you the extent to which conspiracy theories have infiltrated mainstream society. And that's by design. I've gone into that in the past. I don't want to dwell on that here. But this just really underscores the whole trend. But going down into the actual article, the family of DeCarlos Brown Jr., the man accused of fatally stabbing 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee on a Charlotte, North Carolina light rail train in August, says the murder suspect was previously diagnosed with schizophrenia and was hearing voices in his head prior to the attack. So the main narrative here is that he was mentally ill, and this was documented for a long period of time. But when you actually get into the conversation that was recorded between DeCarlo and his sister, it gets really crazy. In audio recordings of a conversation between Brown and his sister several days after his arrest, obtained by ABC News, Brown maintains that he has quote-unquote material in his body that caused him to attack Zarutska. Make sure it was me that did it, not the material. And I'm telling you, the material did it, Brown said according to the recordings. The suspect can be heard telling his sister that he did not even know the lady at all. And yeah, this looks like the face of somebody who is not all the way there, right? And just that quote alone gets us into the territory of the idea of creating programmed assassins. That goes all the way back to well-publicized secret programs at the time, like MK Ultra, that were doing experiments on creating alters in the mind, creating this ability to program someone's mind with a personality that they would be unaware of for the most part until it was triggered by some phrase or something along those lines. Then the alter flips forward and the person does something based on the programming, and then when it's done, it flips back and the person has no idea what transpired. If that is a real thing that's going on, well, obviously it would be referred to as schizophrenia or some kind of mental illness. That would be the cover that would be used by these clandestine organizations to avoid being found out, right? Oh yeah, that person is just mentally ill. Let's throw them away in a mental institution. Clearly there was something just wrong with their mind, right? It didn't have anything to do with the experiments we did on them, and there's no record of that anyway, right? So that's way back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that this kind of thing was being done. And we kind of have an idea of how it works, potentially, because this is what the media does to us collectively, right? The media has created this alter in each and every one of our minds if we are exposing ourselves to it. And it flips forward every time we tap back into it. And that can be watching a movie, a television series, watching the news, reading something that is related to the media in some way. And interestingly, that is kind of shifting as we merge further and further with technology, where technology itself is becoming an alter in our minds, you see? It's flipping forward increasingly as we interact with the devices. And this is like the mind being sent to the land of Oz, right? This new dimension. And slowly over time, we've been building up to this new personality coming forward that's triggered when we interact with this scrying technology, right? We're accessing another dimension. It's a black mirror in that respect. Hopefully you can see how that quite literally mirrors what would be going on in an individual mind that was programmed in this way. It's being done to us collectively, and it started with us in the same way as the technology was in its infancy with television. And slowly over time, we have developed this collective alter that flips forward with the technology as we use it. It's this new personality that is causing people a lot of issues. I mean, the internet is full of people talking about their dopamine addictions and how this technology has ruined so many aspects of their lives. It's because this new personality flips forward when you interact with it, and you have no idea what's transpiring while that's going on. And then when you put the device down, you kind of come back into yourself. Hopefully I'm making it pretty clear the mirroring that's going on here between something like this happening to a person's mind in these experiments, a programmed assassin or anything along those lines, and how our minds are being programmed in a similar way, where this new alter flips forward every time we interact with the technology. And it slowly builds over time until the ultimate end goal where it's the quantum leap, right? That alter fully takes over the human mind and we fully merge with the technology. I never said not one word to the lady at all. That's scary, ain't it? So like, why would somebody stab somebody for no reason? Brown can be heard telling his sister. And isn't that fascinating? And I hesitate to use the word fascinating in the context of a woman who was murdered. But just in the context of what we know is potentially going on behind the scenes with all of this stuff, this guy is straight up saying, I didn't even say a word to her. I had no reason to do what I did, and yet here I am. I'm sitting in jail for murdering this woman, and he's saying there's material in his body. Like, is he referring to some kind of nanotechnology? When you dive deeper into the story, his family says that he was never the same after he came back from one of his stints in jail. Now, of course, going back to my point about psychology being used as a cover in cases like this, they say his family has a long history of mental illness. His father and a half-brother all struggle with the same stuff. His own mother was trying to get the judge to keep him in jail because she was worried about what he might do. But the problem is, either way, you would make the same arguments, right? Whether he was experimented on or he just truly is mentally ill, you would be saying the same things. And so it's very difficult to determine what's going on. We can only go based on what he allegedly said here. Because at the same time, a lot of people can't handle this kind of information. You can see this in the targeted individual stuff on the internet and all the things that they discuss where people read about that and then they go out in their daily life and think it's happening to them when it's not really happening to them. At least not on the scale that the people who it is legitimately happening to report, right? They see things that aren't really there. And in that way, it does create a kind of mental illness. I mean, some people just can't handle this stuff. It drives their mind insane, sort of. But that doesn't mean that this stuff isn't going on, right? That doesn't mean that there aren't these kind of experiments taking place. And I'm talking about things like publicly known programs now, MK Ultra, that happened 50 years ago, right? The exponential rise in the technology that we see all around us would similarly be happening behind the scenes, which is most often, 30, 40, 50, 100 years more advanced than the public is aware of. What are they capable of on a molecular level at this point, right? I mean, we see this in modern vaccinations that are mRNA. I mean, they're literally changing your DNA with this nanotechnology. If they can do that, what else can they do, right? We have to keep our minds open to this kind of thing. And the reason I'm getting into this is because of how perfectly this murder fit the symbolic narrative that is going on right now. What did this man do? He stabbed this woman in the throat. And then Charlie Kirk is shot in the throat. This summer, they talked about a new COVID variant, and they named it Razor Throat in the news. There's this very clear symbolic narrative involving the throat, and as it relates to speech, right? What is all of this in the news revolving around right now? Free speech, or the idea of it being taken away. You have this guy who murders this woman on a train, stabs her in the throat, and it's right during the same period of time when Donald Trump is suspected to be dead, right? When he goes away for Labor Day weekend, but then he comes back right before the blood moon total lunar eclipse. which is likewise right before the assassination of Charlie Kirk, shot in the throat. So the question you have to ask is, are we dealing with some kind of programmed individual who was triggered to do this so that it would tie into the larger narrative? Because you have to remember, as it relates to Charlie Kirk, that the Enough is Enough video on his YouTube channel, the last short posted with a picture of Donald Trump, the Enough is Enough was referring to this murder in Charlotte. Hopefully you can see how that's all subconsciously reinforcing itself. It's a programmed narrative where the Enough is relating to this guy who murders this woman on the train. It's the latest example of why intervention is needed in all of these cities that Donald Trump continuously refers to. That's the last thing posted by Charlie Kirk right before he is shot in the throat. And then you have the Enough is Enough card as that relates to assassination by a sniper. And that ties into the whole Land of Oz thing, where you have the JFK Dealey Plaza 9/11 Twin Tower ritual as it relates to the monolith, the screen at ground zero, right? This is the quantum leap into that device. It's the new altar. And there is no better example of a trauma-based event triggering this kind of thing than the events of that day on September 11th, 2001. The trauma of that began the collective leap of the mind into this new dimension. And that's the corollary to what is taking place with individual minds that are subjected to this. You break their mind and this new personality flips forward. I mean, in terms of celebrities, Britney Spears is probably the best example of this programming breaking down and how they handle that kind of thing. If it's going on there, surely it's possible it's going on in just quote unquote regular people. And so you have to wonder, is this DeCarlo Brown a modern example of this kind of thing that, when you look at the details, is perfectly explainable in conventional terms? Oh, well, he was schizophrenic and he had this breakdown and he snapped. And it's really unfortunate, but the system failed him. He should have been getting treatment. And look, there's this long history of him having a mental illness. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know which one it is. It's just the timing of it can't be argued with. What are the odds that this guy does this, and then it's the basis for this Enough is Enough video that features Donald Trump on Charlie Kirk's YouTube channel, which ties back into Donald Trump's potential assassination that is coming in the future. Or maybe symbolically, it's just relating to our mind and how he represents the collective mind control that's doing it to us, right? It could be that. Or maybe they're going to assassinate him in the future too. I don't know. But in the context of all of that, you have this coincidental assassination on the train that then leads into the Enough is Enough assassination of Charlie Kirk, 2 days after the blood moon total lunar eclipse, as that related to Matt Gaetz and the gate, right, to this new dimension. DeWitt said her son had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and had been given medication, but she said he refused to take it. So there you go. There's the plausible deniability. Well, he was schizophrenic and he wasn't taking his medication, and here you go. But the timing of all of this is just too coincidental. And that's why I read that quote from the Bible at the beginning, because it's like, yeah, this is a story where you would say, well, no human being could be scripting this kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, I tend to agree with that. However, based on the timing of everything and the clear subconscious narrative that is being programmed into everyone through this, necessitates a deeper analysis where we are potentially dealing with something that is not necessarily human in the way that we would consider something human. I mean, it has its representatives that carry these things out, but clearly, if this is something that is scripted, we're dealing with forces that are able to influence minds and coordinate things in a way that the human mind isn't ordinarily capable of perceiving. Tracy Brown, who was assaulted by her older brother in a 2022 attack that saw him bite her and break a door, said he is a paranoid schizophrenic who told her multiple times that the government had implanted a chip in him. Very interesting, right? You have the family members relaying this message to us that this guy believed he had been implanted with something. Brown can be heard telling his sister that the material in his body had forced him to kill Iryna, according to the audio from a call made on August 28th, 6 days after the murder. When I went to visit him, he was mumbling and talking to himself, Tracy told the Post, and I said, well, what's on your mind? He looked at me and he was like, I have to get you too. And I said, what do you mean you have to get me? He said, you and Mama, y'all are being trafficked. And I said, well, how are we being trafficked? And he said, the government is trafficking y'all to get to me. He said he was on his way to the hospital, the mental hospital. And I just wanted to know why her, because he had been on the train for a while before she got on. And he said, well, she was reading my mind. He said she was reading my thoughts. I hurt my hand stabbing her. I don't even know the lady. I never said not one word to the lady at all. That's scary, ain't it? Why would somebody stab somebody for no reason? So it's very interesting, right? You can view this in so many different ways. You could view it as, hey, this guy's just mentally ill, schizophrenic, not taking his medication, long history of incidents, and he just snapped for whatever reason in that moment. He had a delusion. Or you can very easily paint the picture of, hey, this guy was experimented on clearly at some point, maybe when he was in prison, was programmed in the way that they create these individuals with alters that flip forward. And through this technology, or maybe just this influence in general that is not of this world traditionally, thoughts are put in his head in that moment that she is reading his mind, that she is a part of some conspiracy against him. And everything is triggered in that moment to make him have that personality flip forward that murders her, right? Because it's a part of this larger subconscious symbolic agenda. And when you say that out loud, it's like, really? Would they sacrifice a human being just in pursuit of this? And it's like, I can't explain why or why not that would be going on. But I mean, that is one possibility here. And it's just wild to me that it's in the mainstream news. No big deal. In multiple different outlets. This is what I was referring to. The COVID variant NB181 causing razor blade throat. This is from June of 2025. NB181 is allegedly causing more painful sore throats in some patients. And just subconsciously, note how this is an 88 with the B and the 8 here, and then it's 1 and 1. So it's like 88 and 11, or 88 and the 2 towers. As that relates to the whole thing, I don't need to go into any detail. You guys should know what I'm talking about there. But that variant, NB181, was referred to as the razor blade variant in terms of the razor blade throat. Do you understand there, right, what I'm saying? Razor blade to the throat. I mean, that's exactly what happened on that train. And then the throat wound to Charlie Kirk. And they are naming these new variants after clouds, Nimbus and Stratus. Which is interesting because it's this idea of this fog, this layer or sheet of clouds, which are Nimbus and Stratus clouds, that are kind of consuming everything in the mind in terms of the metaphor, right? It's symbolic of this new dimension that is the fog that is overtaking sight. And also speech, and that gets to the core of this whole thing, where you have the New York Times with the headline, "Videos of Charlie Kirk's shooting spread rapidly on social media." And really, the whole scene here is so symbolic along those lines as well, when you look back on it in hindsight. You have the idea of the American comeback being assassinated, right? That idea is gone. And below it, it says, prove me wrong, right? All this idea of the American comeback, and through this event, they prove you wrong. There will be no American comeback. America is intentionally being destroyed, you understand? And it's being destroyed through this turning point, which symbolically is the turning point in the future of the American empire. It's the controlled demolition of the United States of America. Donald Trump is those two towers through his 2 terms, metaphorically being destroyed. And this is the turning point as it relates to the foundational principle of this nation, which is freedom of speech. And one aspect of that is alluded to in this paragraph here. The proliferation of the footage continued a grisly pattern, time and again graphic content of shootings, including the 2018 mass shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue and the 2019 shootings at 2 New Zealand mosques, has immediately been disseminated across the internet, underscoring not only the lack of guardrails against violent material, but how such videos have become fixtures online. Very subtle, but you have this suggestion that we need guardrails on the internet. There's too much freedom. And this is an example of that. You can just see someone murdered if you want to see that. We need guardrails. We have to protect the children from this kind of thing. And that's where you have the age verification laws coming into being, which will tie into the digital IDs, where eventually anonymous speech on the internet will be outlawed if they get their way. And they won't come out and just pass a law that directly says that. No, of course, this will be slow over time. Like they are doing in the UK, where they classify things as hate speech, and if you engage in hate speech, quote unquote, you are canceled, right? Or worse, you're sent to jail or something along those lines in the future. If it's a social credit score situation, you have points deducted and your standing in society is lowered. Dozens of workers disciplined after Charlie Kirk shooting, from journalist to Jimmy Kimmel. Employers and officials are cracking down on comments considered inappropriate, quote unquote, after far-right activist was killed. And before going forward, I just want to point something out here. This is just a random tweet from somebody. I am so scared of the slippery slope. Just imagine if Democrats banned Trump from social media, tried to throw him in jail, and used the FBI to target and censor conservatives. Scary. Now that's sarcastic, referring back to when Donald Trump was being removed from social media, and just in general, the whole MAGA movement was being censored online. And this related to the pandemic, obviously, the medical misinformation, and that whole side of the internet was infuriated and up in arms about the fact that they were being censored, and they were in the position that the other side is in now. And that's why I'm bringing this up, because this is one cohesive agenda, you see, to censor speech, to chill it, to make it normal to cancel someone, fire them, ruin their life essentially for something they say, which is a thing that goes against what the United States of America is from its inception, right? You're supposed to be able to say whatever you want to say, and don't come at me with all of the First Amendment legislated exceptions. Yes, I know those exist, all right? I'm saying fundamentally, though, especially as it relates to a public forum like the internet, you're supposed to be able to type whatever you want to type or speak whatever you want to speak, if you want to refer to older times with newspapers and just in general. There is not supposed to be retaliation for something that you say. And that is being normalized here by categorizing it as hate speech or something inappropriate. And eventually, over time, you expand the umbrella of hate speech and you include all of these things in it, and then these are the things that you can't say, and in that way, you censor what people talk about. And of course, any criticism of the actual power structure that exists will be considered hate speech. You know, that's just how it works. But just, I hope you can see how this is normalizing something in a regime sense, which again is altering the fabric of a constitutional republic where there is supposed to be a peaceful transition from one government to the next. And this is normalizing the idea of the regime in charge being able to target those who oppose them. So it starts with what the Biden administration did to the other side, the Trump supporters, MAGA, and then it continues now to what Donald Trump is doing to the other side, the anti-MAGA side. Each side is persecuted by those in power. And we're starting off very slow here, just with people saying things that are considered inappropriate or hate speech or whatever. But I hope you see how they're normalizing the ability to censor. They're normalizing the cancelization of people. Likewise, the overt beginning of it online was this fake conspiracy movement that was coordinated from the beginning to be exposed, right? It was coordinated from the beginning to create the conditions for censorship. And in that way, they take the truth, they conflate it with this fake conspiracy movement, and then any truth that's in there gets discarded with the fake conspiracy movement being censored eventually, being considered hate speech. All the truth that's in there, oh no, that's hate speech, and it's banned from the internet eventually, right? Oh, you can't say that because it's associated with this person who assassinated a political commentator, right? You can't say this because it's associated with that or whatever. I mean, that's how the game is played. Hopefully that's obvious at this point. And obviously they coordinated the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic sentiment into the war with Gaza so that it would be perceived as building and needing to be addressed. Hey, we got to do something about this rise in hate speech. That's just one small part of it. Hey, we got to do something about anybody being able to access information on the internet without any safety measures in place. We got to get a hold of this. We need age verification laws. We need to remove anonymity. We got to know who people are so we can prosecute them or cancel them or, take care of them. We can't have anonymous people speaking on the internet, having access to our children. Look at what they're doing. They're radicalizing people on the internet to do these crazy things. And it's like, well, maybe, maybe not, right? If we're dealing with somebody like DeCarlo Brown, who is potentially being programmed by these entities to do these things, well, now we're in a different territory, right? Where these things are coordinated so that they can be pointed to in the way that I'm describing it now. And you can imagine the dystopian outcome there where eventually we are fully merged with technology and we have been fully controlled in terms of what we can say within that new dimension. I mean, that's the end game, right? Couldn't be more obvious. That doesn't mean it has to happen. That's just the idea that is being put into our minds, and it's up to us to overcome that idea collectively. But I just had to throw that in there so anybody watching this for the first time doesn't think I'm coming at this from one side or the other. No, this is a coordinated agenda targeting both sides to normalize one principle of censorship, or otherwise normalize consequences for saying certain things. And in that way, you stifle speech and truth in general from being spoken. Over 100 people have faced consequences for remarks about Charlie Kirk's death. Again, normalizing this idea, making it very public, right? Where you have Jimmy Kimmel, a famous individual, being censored, suspended for saying something inappropriate, quote unquote. Normalizing the idea that political speech has consequences now. If you say something about a politician, no matter what it is, or some kind of commentator related to that, you can face personal consequences. And that's so fascinating to me too, because speaking of the law, in a defamation case, truth is a defense, right? If somebody sues you for defamation, whether it's libel or slander, you can walk in there and say, hey, this is the truth. And if you can prove that, there is no suit for defamation. And they are essentially removing that protection through this normalization of hate speech on the internet. Oh, no, you can't say that because it's inappropriate hate speech. It doesn't matter if it's true. Especially as it relates to public figures, because there's a public figure exception too. Hey, you put yourself out there in the public, you don't have the normal protections against defamation that other people have. Report those who celebrate Charlie Kirk death to employers, Vance says. So there you have J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, telling people to snitch on their neighbors, along these lines. And they did the same thing during COVID, right? There was all this narrative out there about, hey, report your neighbors if they're not wearing their masks. Report your neighbors if they're doing this or saying that thing, right? They're normalizing it across the entire society, okay? But they have people so locked in their little individual boxes, they can't see that because they only see it now as, oh, that side's doing it to me. But when my side was in power, I didn't see it. Workers fired, placed on leave for Charlie Kirk comments after assassination. Think about that. If you're a normal person witnessing this, you're not going to say anything about anything anymore because you could lose your job now. You don't have to do anything to the First Amendment as it's on the books. This is just the new reality of digital life. If you say something that is considered hate speech or insensitive or inappropriate or whatever, you will face the consequences. Oh, and then this is Trump confirming that he'll attend Charlie Kirk's funeral, which is in Phoenix, Arizona on September 21st, which just so happens to be the day of a partial solar eclipse, which ties the whole thing together, right? You have Charlie Kirk's assassination on September 10th, just a couple days after the September 7th, 8th blood moon total lunar eclipse. Donald Trump born under a similar blood moon total lunar eclipse in 1946. He is the moon child in that way. Not going to go into all of that again. Done plenty of videos on that. But you have the assassination, enough is enough, right after this blood moon total lunar eclipse. And then the funeral is on the day of a partial solar eclipse as it relates to the turning point of the USA. You see, the Great American Eclipse. You have this assassination that's the turning point right next to a blood moon total lunar eclipse, which is Donald Trump, essentially, and what he is doing to the country, the controlled demolition. And then the funeral is, coincidentally, in Arizona, Phoenix, right? Rising from the ashes. Something new, right? This new dimension in the mind. This new creation. Something new born out of the old ashes. His funeral is on the day of a partial solar eclipse to resonate with that concept of the eclipse of the United States of America. And then this is Kanye West's new documentary, In Whose Name, that will be released today, Friday, September 19th, 2025. And look at the imagery for In Whose Name. You have Kanye West with a silhouette of his body giving you the optical illusion of an eclipse, right? The moon eclipsing the sun. And that should tell you everything you need to know, right? As it relates to Kanye West and his role in all of this. His character is just as scripted as everything else, though, going back to the brown guy in Charlotte, I mean, maybe Kanye's more of a Britney Spears character and they legitimately did something to his mind that is being controlled in a similar way. Maybe he's struggling with all of these altars. And you say that, but then you look at the other poster and the very clear symbolism that's going on here, and it's kind of like, all right, well, yeah, probably not. He's more likely aware of what he's doing and an actor along those lines. But you have to allow for the possibility, at the very least, that this is some kind of programming that broke down with him. And he's got all these competing alters in his mind, and it has driven him insane, for lack of a better term. Now, I don't think that's what's going on, just allowing for the possibility. I think he's very clearly and intentionally doing all of this as a part of the script. He knows what's going on. It's just too perfect in the way that it fits with the larger narrative, subconsciously speaking. And then you have Tucker Carlson, who is an agent. I mean, he's not real either. But he says the Trump administration is using Charlie Kirk's killing to trample the First Amendment. And this is what I mean about this fake conspiracy crowd taking the truth and confusing it with all the other disinformation they promote. Because that's absolutely what the Trump administration is doing, but that concept will be discredited by the fact that it's Tucker Carlson saying it, and Tucker Carlson has no credibility with the majority of people on planet Earth, right? By design. He's playing a character that has no credibility with most people. And so, this true thing that is said here in this headline will be dismissed. That's how the game is played. But the truth is, they are most definitely using Donald Trump to alter the First Amendment. I mean, that's been the design from his inception. It's the controlled demolition of the United States of America. You can't destroy the United States without destroying that, because it's the fundamental principle that it's based on. And then finally, hopefully you guys remember the TikTok story that came out right when Donald Trump was being inaugurated into the presidency earlier this year. There was the story that went viral that they were going to shut down TikTok. And there was this meme that went viral on TikTok during that weekend that started with, "Since we are all about to die." And it was subconsciously driving that idea into all of the people that were anxious about TikTok going away. And they were associating all that energy with Donald Trump. It was a ritual that was designed to power him, at the same time that it was giving the subconscious command about the United States and the mind as it relates to TikTok or time. It's the end of time, as it were, right? All the science fiction that's associated with Donald Trump, Back to the Future, Donnie Darko, the end of one parallel reality and the beginning of another, transferring the mind into the land of Oz. Ozzy Osbourne, Back to the Beginning. It's the end of time in this respect, and this TikTok story is showing you that now, where that ritual that was powering his inauguration, giving people the subconscious idea that the United States time was up, as well as your mind's time, because it's going to merge into this new dimension, right? This new altar is going to flip forward permanently eventually. Time's up, tick-tock. Well, now, in this same window of time as the Blood Moon Total Lunar Eclipse and Charlie Kirk's assassination, the turning point, as it were, you have the TikTok deal finalized, where Oracle, Silver Lake, and Andreessen Horowitz will control the US version of TikTok. But I hope you see how this is an app that's splitting in two, right? It's like the timeline splitting, and the United States has its own Oracle app that is coming into being. And it's a metaphor for the mind and what I was just going into, right? The split, the altar that's flipping forward. And this new app that's related to time is coming online in the United States. Okay? And Andreessen Horowitz don't explicitly label themselves as transhumanists, but their stated ideology of techno-optimism shares many core tenets with transhumanism. So it's the whole thing right there. Tick-tock. Time is ticking. The sand is drawing through the hourglass on the United States of America. And this new app, this new entity is coming into being. And symbolically, it is transhuman in nature, right? It is representing the altar that's flipping forward in our collective mind as we continue to further immerse ourselves in this technology and use it more and more. The neuroplastic brain is rewiring itself to become digital, in other words. It's a transhuman thing, right, that's taking place. Metaphorically, we're not quite merging directly with it yet. I mean, a lot of people want that to happen. I'm talking about what's going on in the mind. And I don't know if I am correct about this, but it appears to me that there is subconscious sorcery targeting the collective mind, relating to the idea of free speech being targeted or silenced or taken away. You have the headline here, "Free Speech Under Attack," in the context of razor blade throat COVID, this Nimbus variant that came out in 2025, the same year that Donald Trump was inaugurated. They originally found it in January, okay, at the beginning of the year, around that same time. And it's getting promoted in the news in the summer, in the lead up to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who, of course, was shot in the throat or the neck, right? His throat was directly targeted by the assassin. At the same time that this Ukrainian woman, this refugee, was stabbed in the throat by an individual who claimed that the government put chips in him and other material that caused him to do it. He was hearing voices. She was reading his thoughts. And he stabs her in the throat. Which leads to the Charlie Kirk YouTube short, Enough is Enough, with Donald Trump staring right back at you, right? He is the moon child, the blood moon total lunar eclipse, the great American eclipse, the controlled demolition of the United States of America, or the attack on free speech, you see? This is a subconscious narrative that is being promoted under the surface that everyone is assimilating into their being, accepting the idea of their throat being slashed, metaphorically. Their ability to speak is being taken away through this propaganda. And you willingly agree to it by not understanding that it is being consented to through your silence in response. Silence is consent in the law. And I have no doubt that the chief counsel on planet Earth is using these loopholes to get around what it is doing that is otherwise breaking every law imaginable in terms of that which created us and what we were designed to be. You can sit here and say that this is all some kind of grand coincidence, I suppose, but it seems pretty clear that this throat stuff is very intentionally being layered on to the news in a way that is subconscious in origin to allow the silencing of all of us. It is high-level sorcery. And when we are dealing with high-level sorcery, it doesn't seem like too much of a stretch to imagine that there are sorcerers who have figured out how to break the human mind and create altars that will flip forward and do certain things that further this agenda. And the amount of planning that goes into that, again, is beyond the scale that my mind is even capable of understanding. But yet, here it is, right? What am I to do with this information otherwise, other than speculate on how it's possible? Try to connect the dots in a way where it's like, okay, does this make logical sense? And in this case, this throat stuff, in the context of free speech being the main issue that everybody is talking about right now, surely is not a coincidence. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. Hopefully that made sense. Later.